I am going to go to the Olympics. Now, at 10 years old, for me, this was the biggest goal I could possibly imagine. This was as big as it gets. This was success. But let me rewind just kind of a couple of years here and give you a little bit of context. Now, there's sort of a little timeline here to follow along. My mom was a single mom, and she raised my brother and I on her own in a pretty rough neighborhood just outside Vancouver. And we didn't really have much growing up. But my mom's goal, her Olympics, her big goal, was to get us out of that neighborhood and get us into a good community with good schools and give us some of the opportunities that maybe she didn't have. So, at 43 years old, she packed us up into this shining example of automotive perfection, and we moved to a little town called Kelowna. Now, in Kelowna, my mom, I didn't realize that what I was going to have to do was sacrifice everything. I knew that she had set this huge goal for herself to get there, and for me, in setting a huge goal for myself, I started figure skating a year later. I set a goal for myself to go to the Olympics, and I told her, because I was inspired by her move. For me, my inspiration was her. And I told her, I'm going to go to the Olympics. Now, for me, at 10 years old, I believed that I would go in 4 years, and it was going to be green pastures and blue skies, and the clouds would part and the sun would shine on me alone. I figured it was going to be somewhat easy. I had no idea that over the next few years, I was going to have to work a part-time job, 2 part-time jobs during high school while training, while my brother worked a full-time job supporting the family, and that my mom would end up having to sell her house to support my training. Now, we sacrificed all this, and by the time I was 18, it was time for me to take my leap. It was time for me to get into that top 10 in Canada. I knew that in order to get there, I would have to be where the top teams in Canada trained. And at that time, they were all in Montreal and in Toronto. And I knew that I would have to get on a flight. I had basically enough money for a one-way flight and for enough training and living expenses for basically maybe 2 months. So I knew that if I didn't find a partner, if I didn't find a training center, I was going to have to figure out how I was going to get home. I was going to have to kind of get a job and get home. Now, when I got there, fortunately, I did find a partner. I did find a training center. And in Montreal, I would learn the true definition of hard work. We would be on the ice oftentimes from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., sometimes 5-6 hours in a row without even stopping for a glass of water. Now, I remember being on the ice, middle of a training session one day, and actually leaning over the boards and throwing up, and my coach looking over and saying, "Hey, Craig, can you please stop puking and get back on the ice and do it again?" We trained very, very hard, but it began to pay off. We started to see some of the results from our hard work, and by 2006, we were Canadian champions. We were one of the top teams in the world, top 5. We walked into the 2006 Nationals, and Nationals they're about a month before the Olympics, and we don't know that if we're going to the Olympics until January, and the Olympics are in February. And in January, we walked in, and we knew that we'd have to be top 2 at Nationals. So we got on the ice, the crowd went silent, the music came on, and to be honest, I was so in that moment that I don't remember most of the performance. What I do remember is the last 30 seconds. I remember rounding the last corner and just hearing this roar, I could barely hear my music. I remember coming in, hitting the ending position, and seeing thousands of people stand, all of a sudden just rise. And it was this massive standing ovation, and the marks came in, and we knew that we were going to go to the Olympics. I looked up, the marks came, the team was announced. I could see my mom up there shaking her fists and tears rolling down her face. We made it. We qualified for the Olympics. This was my childhood dream, and I had made it. A month later, I walked through the stadium into the opening ceremonies under the Olympic rings with my mom and my brother, who had sacrificed so much for me to get there, watching. It was everything that little 10-year-old Craig could have ever imagined. This, for me, was success. So the Olympics are over. I needed to set the next big goal. What is that next big goal? And I think we all know that Vancouver hosted the 2010 games. It had been announced years earlier, so for me there was no better goal than to win a medal in 2010 in Vancouver. That was my next big goal, and I was ready to take that on. Now, I hate to break the momentum because I'm pretty excited, and this sounds like a great challenge to me, but I didn't do this. I didn't win a medal at the Olympics. In fact, I didn't even qualify to go to the Olympics. But let me tell you what happened. In 2007, my partner realized that she had achieved everything that she wanted to achieve. And for me, I wasn't done. I knew that I had more to give. I knew that I hadn't maximized my own potential. I knew that if I quit now because my partner retired, that I would always sit and wonder what would have been, what might have been, could I have made it? And so what I did was I said, no, I'm not going to quit. The Olympics are 2.5 years away, and I am going to do everything in my power to make it. So I said, I'm going to find a partner. I said, if there's a girl out there in the world, she's 5 feet tall, who can land a triple toe. Now, a triple toe is this like jump that we all do side by side. If she's out there, I'm going to find her and I am going to skate with her. I don't care what it takes. So I contacted girls from across Canada, US, Europe, Russia, China. I rented a car and I drove over 3,000 kilometers across North America. Yeah, I did. I tried out with recreational skaters. I tried out with competitive single skaters. I tried out with anybody who would get on the ice with me who was under 5 feet tall that I could lift. In the end, I tried out with a girl from Northern Ontario. Now, she was a strong single skater, but the most importantly is she was 5 feet tall and she could do a triple toe. So we tried out on a Friday. She moved down on the Monday, and we hit the ground running. Now, I'm 27 years old. I'm no longer that 18-year-old kid who moved to Montreal. But we put in 12-hour days. We worked all morning. We did lifts in the afternoon. We'd hit another rink in the afternoon, and we worked. We worked, and we worked, and we worked, and within 7 months, we were ranked second in Canada. We came second at the national championships within 7 months together. Now, after nationals, there's like this show, this gala, and in the show, we did this nice little lift, and I heard this pop in my shoulder. Yeah, that's what I said. And I ended up tearing my rotator cuff in 3 places, which sucks. So the World Championships are 3 months away, and we know that if we don't go to the Worlds, we don't get any international points. We're not on the Grand Prix circuit next year, and we have no hope at getting to the Games in 2.5 years. So we're going. Who cares what it takes? We're not going to quit. So we got on the ice every day, and I don't know if you can notice I'm lifting with my right shoulder here. Well, we learned how to lift with our left shoulder over the next 3 months. We did the lifts with 2 hands. It didn't matter. We got to the World Championships, and we placed 6th. We had the performance of our lifetime, and within 10 months together with a torn rotator cuff, we were the 6th ranked team in the world. Now, getting back from that, we had 2 seasons. I got the shoulder repaired. We ended up losing almost 9 months. And we went through the 2010 season pushing as hard as we could. Nothing could stop us. In the end, we walked into nationals in 2010. We placed 3rd. Top 2 teams go to the Olympics. That's what I said. Again, you guys are good. Now, we're the alternates for the games. We're not going. For me, I realized, and this is going to sound crazy because I know everybody here is all bummed out hearing that, but one of the greatest successes of my 20-year career was not qualifying for those games. And let me tell you why, because when I got home, I sat down, and again, I had no plan B for me. There was only skating in my life, and I sat down and I realized that I was okay. And not like that crazy, like, I think I'm okay. Like, I was okay. You know, so I'm sitting in my apartment and I realize, like, why am I okay? You know, I should be angry. I should be crushed. But I realized that in the end, I had no regrets. I realized that if I could go back and do it again, I would not change a single thing. I would go back and I would do exactly that. That was what was meant to happen. And I realized that it wasn't about getting that medal. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about walking away a champion. It was about setting that bar that high. 2.5 years, I'm going to the Olympics. It was about setting that goal, taking that leap, working as hard as I could, and looking back with no regrets. So I walk away with this new realization of how I'm going to live my life. But as you may know, it's extremely difficult to be an athlete with one focus for 20 years in a bubble. And so many athletes walk out and we do fall into horrible, horrible depressions. But for me, I had this weird little hobby. Now, I know this seems like sort of like not like a big deal, like what are these little weird coffee beans? But I had this hobby of making coffee and tea in my house, and I realized I started roasting coffee, and then I started baking it, and I made these little white coffee beans that kind of tasted like tea. And I was having a really good time, and I didn't really have sort of that big driving success, and I knew that something was lacking, but this hobby was sort of keeping me busy. So I started starting to sell it around town, around to cafes and into restaurants and stuff. And I realized that not only did I know nothing about, like the real world outside of the arena, which is a really tough place to be. I don't know how you guys did it for so long. But I knew nothing about the real world, and not only that, I knew even less about the business world. So what I needed, number one, I needed a big goal. And number two, I needed a business education. So I looked at McGill, and I'd been out of school for 12 years. I had been in high school. I think the last time I opened a book was sometime in the late 90s when Offspring was cool. I agree, they are still cool. I was trying to think of a band, but yeah. So for me, I hadn't been to school in 12 years, and if I was going to pursue a business education, what was I going to do? I could have done a business certificate, I could have done an undergrad degree, but how high can that bar go? And I knew for me at that time that the highest bar I could find was a graduate degree, an MBA. So I walked in, I spoke to one of the professors, and I said, is it something that I could apply for? And he said, yeah. So some universities do make exceptions, and they do let students in without undergrad degrees, but take the GMAT, see how it goes, and put the application in. I was like, absolutely, that's what I'm going to do. So I went home and I Googled what is GMAT, and I ended up figuring out that it is this management test that you need to take to get into business graduate school. So I purchased all of these fancy looking books, and what I did was I locked myself in my room for about 15 hours a day. And this was going on, and I was opening these books, and I was studying, and this was happening during the Olympics. And I was getting all these, photos from all my friends, and one of my buddies sent me all these pictures from his crazy Olympics adventures, And I decided to send him a series of photos from my crazy adventures in my living room. And now, this was pretty much my life from the day that I retired to the day that I took the GMAT. And I can tell you one thing, that I was so far out of my comfort zone, I was terrified. I walked in and I took that GMAT, and I was sweating, I was shaking. I was more nervous than when I first walked up on this stage and completely screwed up the first half of my presentation. Now, I took the GMAT, I did well, and I put in the application, and I left that little section that says undergrad degree, I left that one blank, and I put the application in, and I was accepted. I was the first student in the history of the McGill MBA program to be accepted without an undergrad. And it's not because I'm any smarter or more capable than anybody. It was because I set that bar higher than what most people thought would be possible. And I went for it. I took that leap. I worked as hard as I could every single day in pursuit of that goal. And what about that? Oh, there I am. And what about that hobby I had with the white coffee beans? Well, I did put the company together. I think for those of you who've tried the white coffee chai mix today, it was delicious, tell your friends. I did launch the company, and I can tell you that along with my MBA, this is my next Olympics. And I can tell you that with this, I'm going to take a leap. I'm going to work as hard as I can. I'm going to push that bar as high as I can. So my question to you is this: what is your next Olympics? What is your hobby? What is your interest? Whatever it is that you're doing, don't be afraid to set that bar as high as you can. Don't be afraid to push as hard, to the point where people think, when you tell them, they laugh at you. Set that goal that high, take that leap, and work every single day with every ounce of energy that you have for that goal. Because in the end, you know what? You may fail. You may not achieve your goal, but you may just end up redefining success. Thank you.